complicated, you know, man. Like a damn Rubik's Cube, man. Like talking about blue, red, man. Then you get to one side, and like messed up.
Hey guys, surprise, just me. You may have noticed that the the title and thumbnail of this stream has changed, and that's because plans change, right? I think that there's been some kind of scheduling issue with me and Mr. Kirkpatrick, right? Which again, it happens, right? No hard feelings. I've certainly messed a few things up, but he's not here, right? We had a miscommunication. And so obviously the show must go on. I said I'd go live, so we're live. And so I had an idea, right? And I realized this is similar to what we did a while back, but like I said, I had approximately 13 minutes to think of a new idea. And so maybe you're not getting my most creative concepts. But you know what? How about we do an AMA, right? So there's an @ function in chat. There's an @ function in chat. And if you @ me, well, I'll read through it. I'll go through it with you guys. And I'll answer anything to the best of my ability. Obviously, like Susan's a thing. I guess it's not Susan anymore. Yeah, I know, clickbait. If it makes you feel any better, Minoan, I'm in a similar spot, right? But like I said, I think that I have certain topics to address. If I had a little more time, I'd go through, and I probably still will do a stream on this because of the way the recording schedule for this week is going to go. Is that I have 2 episodes on? No, I'm not. I'm a true Amerimutt in the sense that I'm essentially various assorted crackers. Since should do a cooking stream with Bob Chipman. Honestly, that would actually be really funny. Here's the thing. I've sent multiple emails to Movie Bob. He never responds to me. I'm just essentially I've been cucked. I've been left by Red on by Bob Chipman, which is truly Minoan. I'm sorry to hear about that, man. I didn't know you were. I thought you were just deeply closeted. I didn't know you were out and proud, so to speak. Gum says Bap definitely Jewish. I don't know what to say about that. I don't follow Bap particularly closely. Again, nothing against him. It's just I don't really have time. But I don't know. To me, Bap contributes a lot and doesn't really start much drama. So I'm always hesitant to believe kind of like the swirling right-wing rumor, so to speak. Yeah, that's a deep Movie Bob cut. All right, so what do you think of the best Bond song? I actually am not the biggest Bond fan. I don't know. I watched weirdly enough, I watched the 60s movies with my grandparents and the Brosnan films with my dad. And I enjoyed them well enough, but they weren't exactly my style. I think just I grew up much more with the Bourne films as my kind of like, spy movie of choice. Favorite Midwest emo band / song. That's a deep dark rabbit hole we don't need to go down, but that one American Baseball album is quite good. I've actually been listening to a new album, which is kind of an album out of time. And it's by what is this? Let me pull up who it is. And it's by a band called Dead Love Triangle. They have a new EP out that it's like 2014 all over again. Yeah, Yeah, Luth Templar. Yes, we are doing an impromptu stream. I miscommunication with the guest, and so Jay Burden, would you put your son in boxing or wrestling? Probably wrestling. Just for the brain damage, and maybe it's overstated. I don't want to. Obviously, I don't believe medical science about anything else, but to me, it's like both of those, as far as combat sports go, are pretty hard on your body. If you meet an old wrestler, he's got back and neck issues. But if he really wants to like stick with it and be serious, I'd rather him be a wrestler than a boxer, just for his brain, if nothing else. Although, cauliflower ear, like that's pretty much anything where you're rolling around. So about that were. Yeah, Lou Templar, that's a good way to put it. So, we'll have to be delicate about this because I obviously have quite strong feelings for a variety of reasons. There's a conspiratorial angle, which I'm not going to take, so for those who don't know, there was a mass casualty event at a Christian school with a very valid person. I'll put it that way. You can read between the lines. And there are several things. I don't want to be too conspiratorial about it, but there is something odd that anytime there's a big anti-gun control action happening in the government, there happens to be a mass casualty event. So this happened with bump stocks. It's now happened with pistol braces. Yeah. And obviously I don't want to say necessarily that means the whole thing's fake. That's not what I mean at all. But I do think that there is something about the fact that these people seem to get activated, so to speak. I don't know. But I'll put it this way. She's where she belongs now. Yes, the Templar first gen replicants are being retired, it seems. Yeah, exactly. And it was weird too. It was a 14.5 with a pistol brace, which is an odd setup. Normally people just pin and weld, but again, who knows? Jay Burton, do you think that the media will tone down the gun grabbing narrative given the validity of the shooter and try to memory hole this one? Oh, not at all. They've essentially just not mentioned the validity. They've just gone full on. Thank you, Nudge. I thought that was kind of funny. They've just gone full on, gun control. Like Biden just talking about, ban assault weapons, so on and so forth. Yeah, Normie News almost never mentioned it. And this is interesting, right? Like you see the, New York Times and it says like, mass murder of 6, right? John Carter bringing up something that's very true that these happen all the time, right? But this is different. Church schools aren't shot up all the time. It's normally decivilied subpopulations. Dropped object, Jay Burton, bingo. Yeah, I know. Let's get some. There's no one here for me to agree with. The train is probably coming sooner or later, so you'll get to hear that. What are the other ones? I forgot what the bingo card is. It's got like 49 squares on it or something ridiculous. It's much larger than a normal bingo card. So I've essentially everything I do. But yeah, I have no faith that to many of these people, gun control is kind of an end in and of itself. It's an ontological good. And so it doesn't really matter. It's anything will be used to push it. Right. Yeah. And again, like, I don't want to, I kind of hate talking about stuff like this because it's ghastly and it's awful. I mean, oh, look at that. Thank you, God Emperor of Chiron, or Chiron, God Emperor of. I'm not sure how to say that, but to me, I don't know. There's kind of a meme I've tried to start, and I've tried to start it, and I mean meme also in a way that it's just something I say often, is that like, look, never forget that these people hate you. And it's stupid, it's repetitive. But look, they do. You see what their problem with this is, and you see all of the awful leftoids, saying like, oh, like, haha, their hopes and prayers didn't get them too far this time, or, I'm glad it happened in Tennessee. This is what they deserve for passing an anti-trans kids bill. And again, they hate you. There's no two ways about that. They hate you. And, like Sam Hyde said, they want you dead. They want your kids dead, and they think it's funny. And I don't say that to be melodramatic, to crow about it. Far from it. But like, look, man, these people don't like you. And it's far past just kind of like the casual contempt that I think, many of us have for leftoids, right? Where it's like, okay, whatever the queers and steers do, whatever the fruits and nuts of California get up to, well, that's their business. Well, they're making it very much your business, And again, the very valid people are a protected class. This is an unusual one, just because of demographics, that this started as a female. It started as an XX, I believe, but I don't know. Yep, and they think it is funny. To me, and I was talking to a guest about this last night. I was talking to Drawthentic, who again you guys should check out. He's an interesting man, and he makes good art. But just about the fact that like these people simultaneously want to take away, your capacity, to defend yourself and create the exact type of situation where you need to. Because to be honest, and I hate to say this, but if every gun in America magically disappeared in 1935, you'd probably be fine. And I'm not saying that in a moral sense, but the amount of physical danger you were likely to be in, at least, obviously I'm not talking about wild animals and things like that, but from, your common citizens is much, much lower. But guess what? What's happened since then? Well, your restriction on your ability to be dangerous has gone up, and your requirement for it has commensurately gone up. And to me, at least, right, like I think that this is what we're going to expect in the future. To me, I view, and maybe this is the thing I'm the most black-pilled on, but I view guns as very much a temporary right from our perspective. Yeah, John Carter, I'm not going to read that out directly, but to quote the unofficial motto of the Jay Burden Show, I agree. Yeah, I think that David Pakman was probably the most ghastly out of all of this. He pulled a classic maneuver, basically, making fun of Christians because their God didn't save them, from this this monster, right? But guess what he does? As soon as someone says, "Hey, that's a retarded opinion, and you should feel bad about it," I've been swamped. I've been swamped with anti-Semitism. Deleted the tweet. Ran, hid. It shows the hatred in this country. I'll stay away from saying what I directly feel, but the emotions you feel, I'm sure I felt as well. Any of the guys from the Telegram group know my more explicit feelings. And again, it's I don't know how to say this kindly, but we used to lock people up for being weird. We used to lock up these kind of like awful schizophrenics, these people who in other times would have been seen as demon possessed or, truly insane. And now they just wander the streets. And why should we be surprised that these things happen? Yep. Again, witticism, you're right on the money there. John Carter, I can't say that. You too, Jacob. But you're on to something there. There's and I'll have to speak delicately about this again, just because of and you guys understand. There's a million moving parts with this, and you're kind of stuck in a devil's bargain where on one hand it's like you want to say as much as you can, to get it out there. But on the other hand, it's like you say too much and your whole platform's gone. And I don't say that in the sense that like I make a lot of money. I don't, this is a hobby for me, but also like it's a lot less fun, if you're not talking to anyone. So understand that I'm not doing this out of some like moral compunction. It's just that there's a filthy Pajit looking over my shoulder. I probably can't say that. So anyway, I guess we're fucked anyway. I told you I wasn't very good at this. Anyway, the thing that I've been thinking about is that there's actually been a war on private Christian schools for a while. The system doesn't like them. Yeah, the system doesn't like them. Yeah, and I do have an Odyssey, because Odyssey's kind of it's not a bad platform. It's a little bit confusing, but nonetheless, it's there if you want to watch me there. But there's been kind of a series of sallies made at Christian schools, and I've talked before. I spoke with AA about this, about the proliferation of enemy ideology behind our lines, so to speak, right? So with the adoption of social media, and the pushing of especially like the sexual ideology, it's kind of sprinkled in places you wouldn't imagine, including in these small Christian schools. I graduated from one, it was incredibly impactful on me. That's where I met Bagby, right? One of my kind of recurring co-hosts. And even there, extremely, extremely conservative, very classically focused. I think in my graduating class of 30, our most diverse student was a guy who is a quarter Ecuadorian, so you get the point, right? But even there were gender kids. They couldn't necessarily do it at school, obviously, because school wouldn't handle it. But, a girl a few years older than me, super unstable, adopted, trooned out, and flips out about the same things that this person was posting about, about transgenocide and all that. And there's a part of me that as soon as I saw that, that's the first thing I thought of. Like, oh, that could have been my school. And obviously part of the blessings, and again, like it's fucked to say, but I think that my school probably would have done better just because I know that, the teachers are prepared for such an event. But there's that, which is deliberate. But there's also the lawfare part of it. There's also the lawfare part of it, which is that for every one of these, and this is exactly where I'm going, Cody Browning. With every one of these kids, with every one of these gay kids, these pronoun kids, that there's always the chance, that you're that school, that you're the school who gets hit with the lawsuit, who gets a law named after them, right? A Supreme Court case. And a lot of these institutions don't have a lot of money because these smaller Christian academies, right? They're not like the boarding schools that have been around for 150 years. Almost all of these were put together by middle class and upper middle class people in response to the degradation done to the education system post 64, if you catch my drift. So they're not institutions in that way. They run on tight budgets. A lot of them run on large amounts of student labor, which admittedly is probably good for the kids, but just to show you, right? They're not flush with cash. And a lot of them are in a rough situation, where on one hand, they've got to keep their standards up, but they know they push a kid too far or even worse. And I have, friends who are teachers who are dealing with this, even at good, quote unquote, schools. And every time, there's one of those parents or there's a kid who comes out, they're walking that line. It's a gun pointed at their head, if you pardon them. I shouldn't say that. But again, man, it's a terrible situation. And to be honest, like it's still better than public school, but I mean, maybe it's public school from 10 years ago, maybe 15, there's an intense pressure to conform. Anyway, maybe that's not super. Bra moment. Local church is covered in BLM LGBTQ flags, even had the side of the building painted with some bizarre mural with all that. The upside to that is honestly, those churches die. They do not last. There was a charity event in my small town, right? And similarly, I go to a large conservative church in town, right? We have like 400 members, big old building, very beautiful Protestant church. And maybe a mile down the road is the BLM church, right? But my church, which is relatively conservative, and I'm not trying to like put it up on a pedestal, just as an example, right? Has a thriving population. We have a relatively high turnover rate, which means that there are lots of new members being born. There are unfortunately older members dying. Many times generational. And I mean, this is where I'm getting married, right? So there is kind of a cycle of life to it. But the gay church, the alphabet church, right? It's dead. It is dying. There was a charity walk on the street that I live in, where my church is, benefiting, I think it was a battered women's shelter, right? Like generally positive civic activity, right? And my church didn't officially participate, but there's a large group of us, right? Because it was in the same neighborhood, there were some people involved with the organization. And I mean, in a non-official capacity, there were probably like 35 of us. The Alphabet Church, which admittedly I'd never actually known someone who goes to, but it's the same size building. So in my mind, I just kind of assumed like, oh, they're similar organizations. Maybe 15 people in an official capacity with a sign and a banner. And you look at the people and they're essentially like aging NPR boomers and their children with Asperger's. You know, they waited till 45 to have a kid and now they have a Christian on their hands. And I mean, they're cringe, they're embarrassing, but to be honest, like they're not really a vital cultural force anymore. And it's why anytime there's this kind of like rage bait that goes around about like, oh, look at this female pastor doing all this. To be honest, like they're solving themselves. They're removing themselves from the gene pool. And again, like it doesn't mean that they're not doing evil things. They certainly are, but like they're a societal dead end. You know, they're not reproducing. They're not attracting new members. And obviously, numbers do not convey validity. But when you're maintaining a community, the idea that it is scalable, the idea that it is alive, you know, that's something, right? And to me, it reminds me very much of the Shakers, you know, which were another group from the Second Great Awakening. My big show that Bagby and I did all about the Second Great Awakening, which is a whole bunch of fun. We mentioned the Shakers. And the Shakers were this kind of like religious cult group. And the reason they were called Shakers is the spirit of the Lord would infuse them and they would, go into shakes and roll around. But, in addition to all that, they didn't reproduce. And so they built furniture, right? The Shaker style furniture. They built these wonderful villages of people who died out. And there are none of them left. Fanzang. I don't know how to say your name, man. That's what I go for, though, because I've seen you around a lot. Progressivism, viral replication model relies off hijacking off healthy tissue of other organisms. 100%, right? They don't have to make their own kids; they can take yours, which is a point that I very much agree with, and it's kind of what I was trying to get to. That's a more elegant way of saying it when I was talking about kind of like dropping fire bombs behind enemy lines. If you want Cody Browning again, if you want a picture of the future, it's an army of Christians posting online forever. He's out again. He's out. So if you keep your eye out. One of my favorite factoids is that I actually graduated from the same community college that Christian went to. So when he was posting his boyfriend-free girl, that's where I went to school, which I think is kind of funny. Did I miss something? Nope. Okay, good. All right. Sorry, guys. I'm just trying to catch up with chat. Yeah, the education thing is Christian's out on bail. Someone paid his bail. Which that's a rough sign. Maybe it was that weird rotund homosexual Jacob Sockness, I think. Whoever was sorry, we're not going to talk about Christian. There's a really dark period of time during early COVID. That period of time where life actually shut down for a few I'm not reading that, Luke Templar. I'm not reading that. But I went through a massive Christian tear, and I'm subtly embarrassed and horrified at how much space he takes up in my brain. There's been a lot of suggestions that because Peter Thiel is looking for a new rent boy that I apply for the position. While I appreciate you guys thinking of me, I'm not necessarily interested. I am a deeply avaricious man, but I don't know, man. I aim to live a life free of adult pampers, so I think I'm good. Although that's a little suspicious, right? Yeah. Well, I probably shouldn't talk. I guess what's the point? I've already said enough no words that the Angie Pajit is gonna get me. But yeah, that's a little bit suspicious. I don't know much about it, but homosexual billionaire gets tired of his rent boy and he winds up dead in a pool, right? Witticism TV. Chris Chan was released before Andrew Tate. Actually, that's an interesting question. Can you imagine the buddy cop movie, or not, or like the movie, the unlikely pairing of Chris Tate, or not Chris Tate, of Andrew Tate and Chris Chan in prison together? Sorry, that's just a funny mental image, if nothing else. Yeah, this is truly the darkest timeline. It's you ever think that, like, the Q-tards who are still 2 weeks away, trusting the plan, there's one of them that's like, oh, Christian's out, like it's all fake, there's there's no mastermind. Yeah, that's 100% true. Yeah, there's still Jan 6 guys, speaking of Q-tards, in federal prison. And yeah, Chris Chan is about to drive his busted out Ford minivan across the border. So Robert McDonald, Tate will be played by The Rock, and Chris Chan by Chris Rock. I hate to say it, and maybe this is a hot take, I think Chris Chan's voice is less annoying than Chris Rock, to put it that way. Sonachus are in control. Actually, that would be if I've never gotten Jay Burden fan art, but my DMs are open if anyone wants to draw me the Jay Burden beaver, which you see in the upper right hand, in the style of Sonachu. I'll turn that into something, because I like that idea. Actually, why not? I can do that. I have access to shitty colored pencils and Microsoft Paint, which I guess is all I need. And if you guys have any more questions, I mean this legitimately. I've got another half hour to kill, and I'll answer anything. What you want, a Sonichu medallion? Honestly, that would be something deeply shameful to own, but if someone could get me a good enough replica, I'd pay for it. It'd be funny. What are the odds for Tess becomes Steele's new rent boy? I try not to start inner right-wing drama, but that made me laugh. I'll put it that way. All right. Yeah, Teal is gay. I believe he was the guy, wasn't he, that funded Hulk Hogan's Gawker lawsuit, because that Gawker exposed Peter Thiel as a homosexual, if I'm not mistaken. Six Emperor Tyrannus, is prison gay truly gay? I would say so. I think that it's I think that is metaphysically, ontologically true. Do you believe the false history that war on drugs was a failure? It depends what you mean by was a failure. Like, it didn't work, but also I think that I don't think it was ever, people really wanted it to work. I think that it was a useful thing to have around. They needed to at least keep military age men from becoming interested in drugs, but I don't think they were ever actually interested in, like, putting a stop to the trade. It was too useful. But I do, and again, the mass incarceration thing is sort of, I think, dodging around the issue. And I'm not trying to, like, make fun of you here, but I just genuinely think that the people who are recidivists should not be alive. And I'll leave it at that. Luthemplar, according to his own writing, a bottom. Depends where you are, Christian. It's over. Yeah, I know. Well, yeah, that's the other thing I don't really like. I don't like, in addition to just certain, like, ideological things, I don't like when people try to, like, adopt a weird, like, internet swagger where it's like, oh, if you make fun of me, I'll send a bunch of autistic 19-year-olds to ruin your life. That means I win. It's like, okay, I guess that's the rules of the internet, but to me, it's just, I don't know, it's highly, highly unattractive. Okay, reading through. Look, Brute. Again, I'm trying to be polite. Is he more of a bottom than Andrew Tate? Why am I realize I signed myself up for this, but that's something that I think it does not do the soul good to ponder such issues. But I think it would be a hard won fight. Yeah, I will say, out of all of if you would have asked me before, if you had asked me before, Christian went to prison for what he, yeah, that's 100% true. The likelihood I ever actually turn this into a real job is, did you see the article that Jazz Jennings regrets transitioning? Honestly, man, like, I know I'm supposed to be just like, like hard-hearted, like, like anti-trans bigot, and it's fun to be like that. But honestly, man, like that Jazz Jennings kid is just like, that's awful. Like, that is just awful. Because like, what little I've seen of that guy, like, his mom is obviously pushing it on him, and like, you're a young kid, you're a teenager, your whole family's telling me to do this, and then your mom gets your dick cut off. Like, that's awful, man. Like that, and this goes back to my beliefs about people who should be who should have a first-hand acquaintance with Levitical law. John Carter, again, that's another thing that is funny, but I will not read that. This is what happens when the A-list guest cancels last minute. Yeah, pretty much. But honestly, he didn't cancel. We just, like, I never heard back from him today, which, again, like, I assume either something IRL came up or, he just didn't get back to me. But this is what happens actually when anyone cancels. Have you ever noticed that sometimes I just pull out an article reading stream out of nowhere? It's either because no one would say yes to record with me at 9 p.m. on a random Tuesday, or someone had to back out. Melisma for $5. Do you think Con Inc. will do all it can to contain the tragedy in Tennessee? I actually don't know the angle Con Inc. has taken. I mean, I think that there's an intentional and this is fair enough. Like, the police response to this was excellent within the bounded rationality of an awful situation, right? Like, if you want to find the video, you can, and it's a little bit harrowing, but it's certainly encouraging, because essentially this chiseled jawed Chad, like blonde hair, blue eyed, looks like he's straight out of like an NSDAP like propaganda film, just rolls up and just ends this were. And compare that to Uvalde. I think there's been, some attention towards that. I think that the pistol brace issue, unfortunately, is probably dead because, this person used such a weapon. But again, who knows? I mean, I if anything, I think it's probably going to intensify anti-trans sentiment, if nothing else. Again, I'm not a whisperer in it. Yeah, it seems like he was forced at age 5, which is fucked. Someone pointed out that the kid is Palestinian and was adopted by some chosen. If that's true, that's awful. Yeah, mass incarceration is good. Just look at El Salvador. I would say it is better than what we've got. But to be honest, I don't understand why I should be paying for these people. And that is very Dr. Francia pilled, to go back to Carlisle. Actually, Benjamin Boyce and I are in talks. He might be on soon. Yeah, Prude, you really are going off tonight. Sorry, I know this is great podcasting, but which Carolina is better? I personally prefer North Carolina because I like the mountains. The mountains there are kind of like the mountains in Virginia. I just think they're pretty, but there's a little bit of like, and I realize both Carolinas have this, but there's a little bit of like scrubby sandiness in South Carolina that I don't prefer. But I will say, Charleston is better than any city in North Carolina. I'll put it that way. Smear, who I haven't seen in forever. I miss having you around, man. You were fun to talk to. You send neurodivergent to docs. I send beavers to your house. We are not the same. Yeah, the beaver gang rolls deep. That there is a there was a video of Ukrainian soldiers getting messed up by a beaver. Just the beaver was like just charging these soldiers like they're all scattering, and of course that became a sort of an icon with the beaver gang. Luthemplar, in all seriousness, we should all these kids and adults martyrs. I want someone to make icons of their heavenly entry. Yeah, exactly. They again, it's awful. I don't. I kind of feel conflicted on one hand because it happened. We should talk about it. But on the other hand, it's like, what is there to say? Like it's truly awful. These are our people. These are my people, right? Like this isn't that far away from me. It's at a very similar institution to one that I went to. And yeah, targeted by, and I don't use this lightly, but effectively a demon, someone who's been twisted into a parody of, normal biological functioning. And for what? For this paranoid delusion that they are somehow, they're somehow the underdog. I should calm down. Did you see the guy on that army ad that beat his wife and had to pull the ad they probably paid $1 million for? Yeah, I did. That's just I feel like a normal story. I'm curious to see what happens with the army essentially trying to get, like white Southern boys to get blown up again. I wrote the one Substack I've ever published is not particularly good, but I wrote it, after I spent some time in the far north of Maine, right? So like for those who know the area, I was like almost an hour and a half past Presque Isle, Maine, right? The absolute middle of nowhere. And driving through these little towns, right? Which is, it's very much founding stock America, right? And the veteran cemeteries in these tiny towns are huge. And I'm talking 2-street towns, with a veteran cemetery that's bigger than the entire place. And just seeing these generations of farm boys that basically got, sent over somewhere and shot up. And obviously, like some of them were Civil War vets, people my people fought with. But, there's an honor in that, right? Like these weren't fresh off the boat immigrants. There were people who were fighting, and maybe I disagree with why they were fighting, but, fair enough. There's some honor in that. And I don't know. They need that back, and I think that they're not necessarily going about it in the most cogent way. I think it's going to be hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube, but they'll get someone. They'll get someone. Yeah, John Carter, $177 million for the ad. The Beaver is the natural ally against the gay. I completely sure. Oh, hey Dora, good to see you, man. Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed the show with Authentic. Yeah, Boyce has had a lot of our boys on there. Charlemagne, Dave, Dutton. Yeah. And I will say, I hadn't listened to Boyce in years, like nothing against him. It's just we'd kind of drifted apart. But I went back through, with those series, and it was great. Melon, no, there's not. There's not. I've been doing training for my job, and I don't think I've seen a single white couple that was under the age of 70. All right. Orgy Jorgensen. Jay Burden made me invest in unethical beaver farms. Now I'm broke. I assume they must have at one time been beaver farms. I know there were mink farms. I know fur is kind of out of vogue, but maybe it was all wild trapping. I don't know. I should not get into this. This is not particularly interesting podcasting. Doubting Thomas. I think you're right. Yeah. And I think that this is actually something, because I am not a military man. I don't know very much about the military, but I'm interested in guns. And to me, it seems like there's a play being made to replace relatively fit, competent individuals with lots and lots of technology. So essentially like, oh, we'll just paper over, soldiers who aren't particularly fit, who aren't particularly intelligent, by just giving them lots of like whiz bang toys. I'm curious to see how that'll work. I hope and pray that it won't. Why are they inherently based? I mean, honestly, I think that, and this is the based reading of Joseph Conrad. Oh, what is that famous book he wrote? I can't think of it. The one that Apocalypse Now is based off of. Let me look it up. Colonel Kurtz in it. Sorry, this is, I know, I bet everyone's screaming it at me. Heart of Darkness. See, I knew that. Well, I think that it's basically just like there are much less niceties. You know, it's raw, it's biological, and I think that, you know, there's something about it that sort of forces you to become more primal. Like, my dad's a Gen X guy, and he did the very Gen X thing of, you know, going across the world. And despite the fact that he's pretty liberal, he has, shall we say, experiences in Africa that I think have shaped him for a long time. What do you think is the biggest foreign enemy to the U.S.? I think it's ourselves. It's probably China, if it actually came down to it, but I think that China is overblown. I think that China is playing the game smarter than we are, but I think that China has very much the same problems we do. Like, if you think we're deracinated and disconnected from culture, China's on a whole nother level. And not to say that they're going to explode, that they're not going to exist, they're not going to be a threat, but I just don't see them being the next America. I see them being, you know, one of several powers kind of vying for control. Right. Is there going to be a new Beaver trade? There's a sex joke in there. I can't quite word it. You can make your own at home. Beaver went out of style in the 1840s, unfortunately. Huh. Well, thank you. Okay, Cody Browning. Mostly wild trapping, decimated beaver populations in the upper Midwest and Canada, but the beaver skin hat never went out of fashion. And then Chiron, he got the sex joke. Okay, we thought that we would win the Vietnam War that way with worse soldiers and better tech. Didn't work. I agree. And that's why I'm not super black-pilled, is I kind of don't think that our elites can make it work. You know? They might draft us. Several people have brought that up. Yep, 100 people all saying Heart of Darkness. There's a little bit of delay on chat. So sorry about that, guys. My brain just does not work. All right. There's 70 people watching me just ramble into the void, which is kind of cool. I remember very much, and I don't know if Vingle's in chat, but he was one of the first. John Carter, which again, man, you're on fire tonight. I guess I could actually read this one. Andrew Tate's virtual beaver farms were profitable. Yeah, so the theory that all men are created equal has hit the wall of reality, that not all soldiers can perform equally. You're 100% right. And I think that that's what we are seeing, is we are seeing contests between different factions of where we have different factions of the elite. You know, on one hand, we have kind of like the equity goblins, you know, like the more globo homo types. And on the other hand, we have the, like, in the military industrial complex. And I think that those two are sort of coming to a head. We'll see who wins. I think that the military industrial complex is probably technically preferable, but they're still not our guys. Make the rambling routine thing bullfrog. Well, thank you. I mean, it probably will be. Yeah, Vingle is a Chad. Bio-Lendinism will run its course until the elite control our and maintain control. I mean, you're pretty much right. Smear for $5 Australian. Yaki's espionage for the Soviet Union was predicated upon the fact that cultures can survive communist brutality, but not liberalism. Yeah, you're right. It's, yeah, pretty much. I mean, honestly, the post-Soviet countries are not doing particularly well either. I mean, just look at Russia. Like, okay, Russia kind of has a culture, you know, more so than we, but like, look at their birth rates, look at their population, look at their, you know, rates of prostitution, HIV, like all of these things. Like, I think it's easy to over romanticize it. There's no good way out of this. Gum, dream car if you had sorry, I read that super wrong. Jay Burton, dream car if you had boomer money. Probably like a 1936 Packard 12 coupe in green with tan interior, mostly because I worked on one when I was working for the car collection. It was the most beautiful vehicle I've ever seen, and it I think it did things to my brain. But yeah, that's exactly what I would do, and I'd probably buy that one because it's currently up for auction, and I'll never see it again. John, I should get John Dolio on for local preparedness. All right, I will look up John Dolio. John Dolio. Well, if you spell John Dolio wrong, you will not get any responses. I have not found that. So, you send me a link if you can on Telegram. Why is South Carolina the most Zionist state? I mean, honestly, I think it's just that it's a solid red state, and so they stick people in there who are awful. And evangelicalism. I mean, I've been meaning to have the Godcast guys on the Super Base Lutherans to talk about the Schofield Bible. I bought the book that they always reference, and I've gone through it. Cody Browning again. Speaking of the draft, I've been seeing more ads on the Chicago bus train, making sure if you're 18, you're signed up for the elective service. Get to the noggin jogging. You're 100% right. It does feel like war is a brewing. Russian abortion rates aren't good. Christianity's coming back. It was practically near extinct in the late Soviet Union. Fair enough. Fantastic choice to know they come in green. Yeah, I am a Packard man. Another one is a Studebaker President around a similar vintage. That kind of like pre-war era is really my favorite as far as cars go. There was also and this is a 101, super rare. There are no photos of this actually, but if you look up, Brewster did a small run of bodies for 32 Fords. They're quite attractive. They're kind of interesting looking. Studebaker President, that's another good one. If we're talking more modern, I don't like new cars at all. Like not even in a boomer way. Like I think the last year it was possible to make good cars was probably like 2012. Actually, that's not 100%. Maybe like 2017, 2018. But if it's like a newer car, I think that those Porsche Cayman GT4s are quite attractive. They do things to my brain. So that's the 2010s, the 2000s. I'll think about that because I really have I know they're awful, but I kind of like those like last gen Vipers. I think they're kind of cool. I just like cars. There's no good or bad answer to that. And that probably came out with John Dolio's with Tactical Wisdom. Tactical Wisdom. Let me look that up. I've been wanting to talk to more gun guys. I actually have a guy who has a small channel who I found. Tactical Wisdom, John Dolio. Awesome. I've seen him around. I think I know that symbol. Awesome. Well, yeah, I'd talk to that guy. Cool. All right. Anyway, another Miata. No, I've had too many Miatas. At least certainly not at the price. How can we help you get blackpilled on? He doesn't go on anyone's show. I would love to talk to him. I don't listen to all of his streams just because he puts out a lot of them, and I have limited hours in the day. But yeah, if I could, I would. He's just infamously hard to get a hold of. I think Woes is the only one who can do it. Yeah. Gum, I saw what you posted, and I agree. Jay Burden, how to lose one's inner bugman. A lot of things I'm naturally interested in are what one would associate with bugman. So there's several things, which is one, like actually there's certain bugman interests that I don't think are terrible. It's just in moderation, right? Like if you have like a nerdy hobby, like I paint miniatures every once in a while. I don't do it that often, but like sometimes if, I don't have an episode or something, it's late at night, I don't have any friends around. It's a nice way to wind down. But I think that it's important to turn those interests into something that's the most like pro-social that they can be. So for instance, right, like if you're interested in like war games, right? Well, okay, like that probably means that you're pretty interested in something like history. So try and take that from being exclusively fictional to something, real that like expands your mind. Or if you want to continue in that interest, well, do something with other people, do something real in person. And I think also it's just more important to set up kind of like healthy boundaries. And for me, I was always thought of myself as like quote unquote a nerd until I realized that I didn't have to think about myself like that. I could just do whatever I wanted. And if I liked it, it didn't matter. I didn't have to fit into some kind of like high school clique. So for me, like I was always on one hand interested in kind of like nerdy politics stuff, but I was also super interested in cars. It's not a really common combination, but you can just do it. Or similarly, right? Like I'm pretty into weightlifting and like there's more of a crossover than there used to be. But like, a lot of the guys who do that are just meatheads. But I think it's important to, if it makes sense, to try things that are kind of outside of your initial interest and learn to reward yourself with kind of reward circuits that take longer and require more of you. Because like video and, like even like content like this is super high dopamine up front, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not good for you, if that makes sense. I don't know. Gum, yeah, I eclectic old man taste. I love Olds 88s, man. And all of the first three generations are so good looking. I'm glad you say that. What they did to Oldsmobiles, a crying shame. Oh, Manoa, that's another good one. I want, and I've mentioned this multiple times, like an 86 Chrysler Imperial Frank Sinatra edition. Maybe it was an 83, but future conflict guy. Z28. You know what? The last gen Z28, the one with those like crazy carbon ceramic brakes, those things were really cool. I was at VIR when they did a bunch of testing, Car and Driver did for it, and it was frighteningly fast and so loud it made my teeth hurt. But that was cool. Same thing with the GT350Rs. I think those are also kind of neat. That's 100%. Chiron, the PT Cruiser is the most genic car. The HHR is kind of a similar car. I had to swap an engine on one, and this doesn't make sense. For those of you at home, look up what a Chevrolet HHR looks like. And it looks like, if you could imagine, a 1940s style wagon made in the middle of a financial crisis. It is a miserable machine. But the PT Cruiser, a couple other cars from the era, like retro, but like smoothed over blob retro was in. The Mustang of that era is very retro styled as well. And so what they did is they adopted the styling of a retro car, but the structure of a modern car. And it made it impossible to work on. And so changing an engine on this car, and I've done that, in many vehicles before, and like in a Miata or something similar, rear-wheel drive, or like a Ford Model A, you could take an engine out in like an hour and a half if you're really rolling. It's not hard. But in that thing, it took me a day to get it out. Sorry, that's neither here nor there, but I hate that car. That's a good one, Nudge Unit. Again, you guys have some good taste in cars. Best 80s American car. That's a rough era. I'm kind of just I like the way that they look, but I think that I think it's like is it a shovel nose Ford from that era? I think they're kind of good looking. And then I just think Fox bodies look neat. There's no two ways about that. Again, yeah, retro. We've just gone into 280Zs. Not a bad option. I prefer the early cars a lot more. The 240s I think are much prettier. But my sleeper dream car, and this is actually something I might just buy from time to time because they're not that expensive. I love those last gen 300ZXs. I think they're very pretty. All right, guys. Luthemplar, the DeLorean, that is the true Redditor's choice. Yeah, and honestly, man, like a GNX, actually, that's a good choice. But man, like cars are rough now. Cars are rough. It's that if anything would get me blackpilled, it's talking about cars. All right, guys. we've hit an hour about me talking about almost anything. And again, guys, thank you for coming out. Thank you for rolling with an unplanned AMA. This is fun. I enjoyed it. I do enjoy these kind of ramble streams. But Turbo Donk. Anyway, guys, I'm gonna head out. Thank you so much for putting the time in. And oh yeah, I should say before you guys go, we have a sponsor, which is Axios Remote Fitness and Coaching. And guess what? If you follow the link in the description, you can use my personal workout, like the one I used today. You can get as juicy and big as Jay Burden. And there's a code BEAVER, so you can get it for a discounted price. How about that? So anyway, talk to you guys later. Good night.